Welcome back. It's clue 4. Hope you had fun doing all those foundations from last month and you got them all done, and now we're moving on. This month is a pretty easy clue. It won't take you much time, and except for one technique, everything else is what we've basically done so far. So I'm just going to more or less walk you through it. One of the things though that's very important is to reserve and how you cut the pieces of the borders. So it's written in your pattern, but I'm going to go over it with you too. We talked earlier, there are only 4 narrow border stripes, and we use those again in this clue. So what I wanted to mention to you is to go ahead and pre-cut them. From 2 of the narrow stripes, you need to cut two pieces that are 56 inches. Now by 2 pieces, you need to cut one 56-inch piece from one narrow stripe and another 56-inch piece from the other narrow stripe. These are to be used for borders. Later down the line, we want to make sure you haven't cut things and they're not going to fit. From the remaining 2 stripes, you're going to cut 2. So 2 of the narrow stripes, you're going to cut 56-inch pieces. 2 of them you're going to cut from each one 2 30-inch pieces. So you just cut those, set them aside. They're to be used as the border. The remainder is going to be used in this clue. We're going to be working with it. So let's first get the templates. You have 2 templates that you're going to need for this clue. One of them is template G. There's a difference in how you cut these according to where the grain line falls, depending on which kit you have. So look in your instructions, read accordingly for your specific kit. Then the other piece that we're going to cut is from the border print. And once again, we're going to butt 2 edges next to each other, line up the arrows there, and overlap so that the dotted lines match. So you could either cut right at the dotted line and then butt the edges up to each other, or you can slightly overlap them. This time I've slightly overlapped them. It doesn't matter whichever way you want to do it, just so long as they come together evenly. Now the last time we used this narrow border, when we put it on those triangles that we had, we used the whole part of the narrow stripe. I will show you on this one, when we pull in the stripe, the piece is a little bit narrower. So on the outside, which is where the arrow is, that part wants to go right by a line, right outside the line from the border print. And the middle one, where it comes, is slightly beyond the brown line. It doesn't quite fit. So I've gone ahead and cut these. I mean, there's no secret in cutting these. It's exactly the same. We need 6 cut one way and 6 reverse. Same as we did when we cut the border pieces for those triangles. We did 2 reverse and 2 non-reverse. So we're going to do the same thing where you would mark part of the design from the border print onto the template, and you'll cut 2 exactly the same. And this is from the remaining narrow stripe that you have. You can fit these in. So 6 one direction and 6 when you flip them over. But always remember, the arrow is the side where you have the line from the border print. So that's the important thing to keep in mind here, even when you're flipping them and so forth. Don't move it to have that on this inside part, or they're not going to match. Always make sure when you cut that brown, well in this case the brown line, but the line from the border print goes right up to the seam line, and you're sewing right between the seam allowance line and the brown stripe. So you can see here I've already pre-cut those. You don't have to watch me cut them out. These 2 are the same, obviously. This is the reverse. So you see how you're cutting this piece practically right at the line. Oops, I didn't cut this one yet. Let me see if I've got another one that's cut off. There we go. So they're cutting right at the line there, whereas this, you have that seam allowance beyond, and that's going to be the outside of what we're sewing. You're going to be cutting these pieces, which are your G pieces, This is going to sew along here, this is going to sew along here, and then you're going to join them up the middle. So I'm going to sew these pieces together and then show you how you join them to match up the design from the border print. That's one of the important lessons for this time. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so I've sewn up the first seam. I've put the first one on here. You'll see how I sewed just the outside that's lined, so I don't quite get a line. There's a little bit of the design showing on the inside here, which is fine. I'm going to set the seam. And then I'm going to sew the next piece up the other side. Now you'll notice I don't know that you can see that well, but I've started and stopped at the dots. That'll allow me to get this next piece in. Let me show you first. This is important that when we line up this one, that you get this exactly at the dots in the same spot, because these are going to have to line up when we sew that final seam. I'm going to start by lining these pieces up to make sure the design exactly matches. And I'm going to put a pin. You want to make sure you do this. Don't just willy-nilly sew this piece on, because the designs might not match at this end when we get there. I'm just going to make sure this matches. Yeah, this is fine. Then I'm going to pin down here at the dots. And I'm going to sew that seam up. It's just the same as you've seen me sew already, so I'm going to sew it, and I'll be back with you in a second as soon as I finish that sewing, and we'll finish the piece. So I have sewn the second piece on here, like that, to the point. I'm going to go ahead and set the seam. I won't worry really about opening that out until I get the whole thing done. Now the important thing is lining up these two pieces so the design matches exactly, and it's just a little bit tedious work. I fold it back and I find some portion, like there's this little curly Q of that, and I line them up exactly. Don't worry about the cut edges. It's more important to get the design. You know, one of those edges might have been just slightly more than the other. I'm just lining up the design of the fabrics. And then here, because this is kind of like a set-in seam, you want to butt your stitches up right next to that seam where you ended the seam, push against it, and go in and just continue down the next side. Now you don't need to sit here and watch me sew this. I have some that I've already sewn, and I can show you how you get that nice sharp point. And you see how this design matches up exactly? And they're all the same because I use the same template with the marks on it, and you've got that nice sharp point here. So you need 6 of these for next time, and we're getting close to discovering some other aspects of this mystery quilt, and I hope you're enjoying it. We'll see you next time.